Summer 2026 has not started and the grid is already buckling. New York's power operator announced this week it will enter the season with the smallest reserve margin in state history, 417 megawatts. That provides enough slack for 250,000 homes in a region of 20 million. $50 is what it cost. A man in Tucson to stack reclaimed cinder blocks against the shaded wall of his house. He ran a drip line from a rain barrel and dropped the air passing through that wall by 25 degrees Fahrenheit on a 105 degrees afternoon. No electricity, no refrigerant, no moving parts. The Department of Energy confirmed the physics. Evaporative strategies deliver 15 to 40 degrees of temperature drop in low humidity climates. Persian, Egyptian, and Roman builders used porous wet masonry to cool structures for thousands of years before anyone invented a compressor. Yet, a single provision in the International Residential Code, Section R 702(7), renders this wall a code violation in 38 states. The provision does not mention cooling walls. It does not reference evaporation or masonry. It mandates something else. And that something else is worth $130 billion a year to the industry that wrote it. This is a wall that succeeded too cheaply for the system to tolerate. This is Off-Grid Secrets. You already know what your summer bill looks like. American residential electricity rates have climbed 21% in 5 years to just over 18 cents per kilowatt hour. In Phoenix, the average household pays $200 to $250 a month to keep the air conditioner running between May and September. Larger homes crack $400. That is not a utility bill. That is a second car payment, except the car goes nowhere. In 2017, a 2-year-old architect in New Delhi decided to stop paying it. Monish Siripurapu had graduated from the School of Planning and Architecture in 2009 and founded a small design firm called Ant Studio. His first major commission had nothing to do with luxury condos or commercial towers. It was a problem no one wanted. A diesel generator plant at the DEC Electronic Factory in Noida, Uttar Pradesh, was venting exhaust at 122 degrees Fahrenheit directly into the parking lot. Workers could not stand near the wall. Management wanted the heat gone. They did not want to pay for industrial refrigeration. Shira Parikh's answer was clay. He stacked roughly 700 hand-thrown terracotta cones into a honeycomb pattern. Each cone open at both ends, each surface left unglazed and porous. Then he piped recycled factory water to trickle across the clay from above. When that 122 degrees exhaust hit the wet terracotta, it exited the other side 11 to 14 degrees cooler. No compressor, no refrigerant line, no electricity, beyond a small recirculating pump that could run on a solar panel the size of a laptop screen. The physics behind it is not complicated. Every gallon of water that evaporates absorbs roughly 8,000 British thermal units of heat from the surrounding air, the same thermal energy. A 1-ton air conditioner moves in 90 minutes, except the terracotta wall does it for the cost of the water. The installation smells faintly of wet clay and moss. Biofilm that forms naturally on the cones traps airborne particulates and acts as a secondary air filter. Shira Parikh was not inventing. He was remembering. The way we cool our buildings right now is totally wrong. Shift even 30% of your household load to a wall like this, and in Phoenix that is roughly $60 a month back in your pocket. Not someday, not after $20,000. Solar installation pays itself off in 11 years. Next month. That is, groceries for a week, half a car payment. The difference between making it through August and falling behind. They coded it out, but they can't code out physics. Subscribe where the next archive opens soon. Now, let's get back to the investigation. Now, here is where I need to be honest with you. This wall does not work everywhere. Evaporation needs dry air at 80% relative humidity, because the kind of afternoon Houston or Atlanta or Miami delivers every day from May through September. The temperature drop collapses to about 3 degrees. That is barely perceptible. If you live in the wet southeast, this is not your primary solution in July. But the Department of Energy confirms that evaporative strategies deliver 15 degrees to 40 degrees of drop in compatible climates. Phoenix, Denver, Boise, Salt Lake City, Albuquerque, El Paso, the entire inland west and southwest, roughly 40% of the continental United States by land area. In those regions, a porous masonry wall is not a supplement to your air conditioner, but is a replacement for it. And the physics only gets more powerful as the heat intensifies. Researchers, He and Hoyano at the Tokyo Institute of Technology measured porous ceramic pipes wicking water more than 1,300 millimeters vertically, over 4 feet or without a pump. The water lifts itself through capillary action. The wall wets itself. The entire mechanism runs on gravity and surface tension, two forces that do not bill you monthly. There is a building in the Iranian desert, 2,400 years old, that used the same principle to make ice in the middle of summer. No electricity, no moving parts. We will come back to how. The archive opens in 400 BC on the Iranian plateau. They were called yakchals, conical domes of adobe rising up to 18 m above the desert floor, sheltering underground chambers as large as 5,000 cubic meters. The walls at the base measured more than 2 m thick, built of a mortar called sarouj, sand, clay, egg whites, lime, goat, hair, and ash.
Night,
that mixture resisted heat transfer so effectively that water channeled into the underground pit during winter nights would freeze and stay frozen through summer. Wind catcher vents above pulled hot air up and out. Radiative night sky exposure drew stored heat away after sunset. The Yakchali Moayedi in Kerman is still standing. 24 centuries of desert sun, and the structure has not failed. In February 1978, Mehdi Bahadori of Sharif University in Tehran published the paper that introduced these structures to the Western engineering world. Passive cooling systems in Iranian architecture in our Scientific American. For the first time, American engineers had the thermodynamic math behind what Persian builders had known since before Aristotle was born. But the principle was never Persian alone. Egyptian frescoes from 2500 BC depict servants fanning air across porous water jars, the earliest recorded image of deliberate evaporative air treatment. Fatimid Cairo in the 12th century formalized the idea into the mashrabiyah, an intricately latticed wooden screen placed over water vessels, cooling and humidifying the air drawn through it. Romans hung soaked fabric in doorways and carved shallow water channels into the walls of their villas. Every civilization that lived in heat discovered the same physics independently. In 1967, a French engineer named Félix Trombe and architect Jacques Michel built the first occupied solar mass wall house in Odeo, France, the modern Trombe wall. Edward Morse had patented a precursor in Massachusetts in 1881. The concept was documented, the engineering was proven, and the material costs were negligible. And then, in the United States, an architect tried to build houses that did not need air conditioning. He lost his license for 17 years. Section Air 702.7 of the International Residential Code. That is the line. It mandates Class 1 or 2 vapor retarders on the interior side of exterior frame walls in climate zones 5 through 8 and Marine 4. The 2026 International Building Code tightens it further. Section 1402.2 now requires a weather-resistant exterior wall assembly with flashing and a water-resistant barrier behind every exterior veneer. The barrier's explicit purpose, preventing water accumulation inside the wall. A passive, evaporative masonry wall accumulates water on purpose, and that is how it works. But the misdirection is elegant. No regulation in any American code book mentions evaporative masonry by name, and no committee voted to ban porous cinder block. What they did was mandate 3 characteristics that a deliberately wet, deliberately breathable wall cannot possess. An inspector enforcing these provisions cites 3 independent violations from a single structure. No Class 1 or 2 vapor retarder. No continuous air barrier under IECC R400 and 2.4. The provision requiring the building's thermal envelope to limit air leakage, and no water-resistant barrier behind the veneer. And 3 strikes, 1 wall. The homeowner who wants to build one anyway has exactly one legal path. Hire a state-licensed professional engineer to draft and stamp an approved design exception, and cost of the engineering review, $3,000 to $10,000. The $50 wall now costs $10,050, and the engineer's stamp does not guarantee the inspector accepts it. Follow the money and the logic inverts. The United States HVAC market generated $129.63 billion in 2025. The global spray foam insulation industry, the companies whose products fill the sealed wall cavities that building codes now require, is worth $2.18 billion. BASF, Dow, Saint-Gobain, and Huntsman hold the largest positions. When the 2021 IECC update tightened vapor retarder and continuous insulation requirements, the industry blog at continuousinsulation.org published a celebration. Their language. The new rules were properly coordinating the use of cavity and continuous insulation materials for energy code compliance with water vapor retarders. Translation. The code now requires our product, but the revenue does not stop at the sale. The U.S. HVAC services market, not equipment, just the maintenance calls, reached $26.9 billion in 2024. 55% of that revenue flows from preventive maintenance contracts. The business model is a recurring revenue customer, paying $120 to $1,500 a year for the privilege of keeping a machine running that a wet wall makes unnecessary. A $50 wall that never breaks destroys a subscription. They wrote the vapor retarder tables that classify a wet wall as a code violation. They funded the insulation standards that require sealed cavities filled with proprietary foam. They built the appraisal structure that penalizes homes without central air, licensing apparatus that punishes architects who design outside the envelope. And they made sure the only legal path to an exception costs more than the wall itself. His name was Mike Reynolds, University of Cincinnati class of '69. He started building houses out of recycled tires and aluminum cans in Taos, New Mexico in 1971. The structures were called earthships, the self-heating, self-cooling, off-grid homes that use mass walls, buried thermal mass, and natural ventilation to maintain comfortable temperatures year-round without mechanical systems. By 1990, the New Mexico Board of Examiners for Architects had revoked his license. His offense, designing buildings that did not conform to standard construction practice. Translated from bureaucratic language, his crime was building homes that did not need air conditioning. They've lied to us. They've passed laws and taken them away. They've crucified us. They've taken my license away. It took 17 years and a special piece of state legislation, the Sustainable Development Testing Site Act, before Reynolds could legally practice again in 2007. But even clearing the code barrier does not end the fight. HUD 4000.1, sir. The Federal Housing Administration's Appraisal Handbook instructs appraisers to flag the absence of central air conditioning as a form of deferred maintenance and to calculate a cost to cure. In practice, a home that uses no mechanical air conditioning is appraised below a comparable home that does, and the mortgage shrinks, and the bank funds the house with the machine, not the house with the wall. Builders will not build. Codes will not change. And the grid keeps hemorrhaging. PJM Interconnection's 2027 to 2028 capacity auction cleared at the price cap $333.44 per megawatt day years and still fell 6,625 megawatts short of its own 20% reserve margin target. Utilities across the country filed $31 billion in rate increase requests in 2025 alone, double the prior year, affecting 81 million Americans. The system is failing. The bills keep climbing, and every dollar flows through a machine that a stack of damp cinder blocks could replace. But some builders never asked permission. Quentin Wilson started making adobe bricks in his Albuquerque backyard in 7th grade, not for a science project. For the same reason, some kids build tree houses, because the material was free. The process was simple, and the result was something real. He became a licensed general contractor in New Mexico in 1982 and spent the next 25 years building solar adobe homes across the northern part of the state. He is now Director Emeritus of the Adobe Construction Program at Northern New Mexico College in El Rito. Is greater than music. In 1970, Adobes were 50 cents. Now they are $1. The cost has only doubled. But a 2x4 that was 50 cents then is now 250. Wilson's walls work because Adobe
Thermal
stores
mass
heat during the
performance.
day and releases it slowly at night. Thermal mass in action. But when LEED and HERS rating systems
Failed.
attempted to score his buildings, the
thermal image
R-value
is showing
only
a temperature of
methodology
50 degrees
gave Adobe
Celsius on the
zero
wall.
credit for that
According
mass.
to my
The
calculation,
graders
that's
did not
impossible.
understand what they
What
were
am I
measuring.
missing?
The wall that performed
Excellent.
better than insulated
Adobe.
stud framing in
But
real-world conditions has scored
fiberglass.
worse on paper than a wall
Superior.
stuffed with fiberglass
Adobe
bats.
excels
In
in
1971,
efficiency.
Steve Baer took the same
Fiberglass
instinct
in
in a different
rating.
direction. He stacked
I
roughly
always wanted to be
95.5-gallon water drums behind
completely
south-facing glass in a house he designed and built in
Now,
Corrales, New Mexico.
with these
400 square feet of
solar-powered
collection
drums,
area.
I finally
1,900 square feet of living space. Water absorbs heat during the day and radiates it inward at night. In summer, exterior insulating panels reflect sun away, and the drums become thermal sinks that absorb interior heat. That house has been conditioning
53
itself for
years.
53 years. No compressor,
She's
no
held up
refrigerant,
well,
no
haven't
service
ya?
contract, no utility bill for space heating or space conditioning. Baer
May
founded ZoneWorks Corporation in
2024.
1969 and
Just
co-founded the
6
New Mexico
months to
Solar Energy
finalize the
Association in
design.
72. He died in May 2024,
Wait.
just as the grid crisis he had spent
This
half a century
joint
warning
right
about
here.
arrived on schedule. I believe the ground
And this
rules
is
can
why
be
these
transformed
traditional
so that
structures are
technology
not just
simplifies
buildings,
life
but
instead of
living
continually
stories
complicating it.
passed through
The world outside
generations.
America
We
never
must
stopped
preserve
building this
them.
way. In
Look
India,
at
where
that.
only 24% of households own air conditioning or an evaporative cooler, desert coolers are not alternative technology.
Best
They are
thing
the
all
dominant
week.
one. The Indian evaporative cooler market reached $144.6 million in 2023 and is still growing. The India Cooling Action Plan explicitly promotes evaporative strategies as national infrastructure. What America regulates out of existence, India scales by policy. In Yazd, Iran, inscribed as a UNESCO World Heritage City in 2017, over 700 wind catchers remain in daily residential and commercial use. The tallest at Dowlatabad Garden rises 33.8 m above the courtyard. These are not museum pieces preserved behind velvet ropes. They are pulling cool air into living rooms every afternoon this summer, the same way they have for centuries. Doug Balcom, a nuclear physicist at Los Alamos who pivoted to passive solar research in 1973, says, built an Adobe and Trom wall greenhouse house in Santa Fe. 80% of its heat came from the sun. His backup electric bill averaged $48 a year. Hassan Fathi designed New Gorna, a mud brick village for 7,000 residents near Luxor, Egypt between 1946 and 52, complete with vaulted roofs, courtyards, and Malkoff wind catchers. Music, he declared it a failure in his own lifetime. The residents resisted relocation. They viewed earth construction as a mark of poverty. Today, the village sits on the World Monuments Fund watch list, and Time named it one of the world's greatest places in 2024. There's no factory on Earth that can produce houses these villagers can afford. History proved him right. The retail version of the wall, in this video, 64 standard cinder blocks at $2.25 each. 4 bags of mortar, a length of rebar, a rain barrel, and a 1/4-inch drip line cost $130 to $330 new. With reclaimed blocks and a repurposed drum, $50 to $110. Build it freestanding under 6 feet on the shaded north side of the house. In
Ensure
most
this
jurisdictions,
bond is
a
perfect.
freestanding masonry wall under
Checking
6
the
feet
levels
and
now.
not bearing structural
Needs more
load does not
mortar on
require a
this
building
end.
permit. Frame it as a landscape feature. Pair
And
it with
here's
a
where we
rooftop
collect the
rainwater
water
catchment. Keep it off
in
the
the barrel.
condition envelope, and no
full
vapor retarder
schematic.
rule applies. The pattern repeats across every technique they buried. Earth tubes, PVC pipes buried 6 to 10
Green
feet
pipe
underground that
section
pre-cool
6
air to ground temperature
confirmed.
are excluded from residential codes
Alignment
over
looks
radon
good.
concerns. The EPA has never substantiated for sealed systems. Solar chimneys
is
that drive zero
truly
energy
a
stack ventilation
remarkable
conflict
piece
with
of
IECC
engineering.
air leakage mandates. Rammed earth carrying 8,000 years of proven thermal mass requires a $10,000 engineer stamp in 46 states. Wind catchers, revived by the UAE in Masdar City, appear in 0 lines of American residential code. They will not tell you that Persians were making ice in the desert in 400 BC. using nothing but adobe domes, Qanat water, and the cold of the night sky, and that the Yakchal A Moayedi in Kerman is still standing 2,400 years later, while your $5,000 central air unit will be in a landfill before your kid graduates high school. They will not tell you that the head of the Daulatabad garden in Yazd told the press in 2023 that the system is, and this is a direct quote, totally clean because it uses neither electricity nor polluting materials. They will not tell you that NERC's January 2026 long-term reliability assessment placed 13 of 23 North American grid assessment areas at elevated or high risk of blackouts over the next decade, and projected summer peak demand to grow by 224 gigawatts, 69% larger than the agency's own forecast just 2 years earlier. They will not tell you that the spray foam insulation industry grows 6.7% per year, and that BASF, Dow, Saint-Gobain, and Huntsman found the Air Barrier Association of America, the trade group that participates in drafting the very vapor barrier provisions that make your wall a code violation. They will not tell you that the Zion National Park Visitor Center, designed by the National Renewable Energy Laboratory and opened in 2002 inches, Springdale, Utah, uses trombe walls and passive downdraft, cool towers to cut energy consumption by 70% at a cost of 43 cents per square foot per year. The federal government already built this. You can visit it on your next vacation. But FHA appraisal rules make it functionally impossible to build a residential version in your own neighborhood. Breeze is moving through a wall that owes nothing to a utility, nothing to a compressor, nothing to a billing cycle. It moves because water wants to become vapor and air wants to become cool. That is not a product. That is not a subscription. That is physics. Older than every code committee, every industry lobby, every rate hike that has ever landed in your mailbox. The wall does not need your money. It needs your attention. And now it has it. Share
With
this.
RealLock,
Save it.
you can find
Build
the
one.
perfect balance
The archive
in your
does
investment
not close.
portfolio.
The
Next week,
EarthTube system
the buried pipe
utilizes
that drops your
stable
indoor
underground
temperature to
temperature
55
to
degrees
pre-cool
using
or
nothing but the
preheat
ground
the air
beneath your
before
feet.
it enters the
Earth
house,
tubes. The
providing
investigation
efficient climate
continues.
control.